So currently I'm a health and wellness instructor at Southern Union State Community College here in Opelika, Alabama. Before that, I taught for 7 years in Opelika City schools at the intermediate level, 3rd through 5th grade, physical education. I hold an undergrad and master's from Auburn, both in physical education, with a minor in sport management. So, but I knew all along that I wanted to teach the younger ones. So I really thought out of undergrad, I wanted to teach littles, K through 2. And then just, the job market wasn't available. And then my wife is a fellow educator. She taught, she's certified elementary ed.
Okay.
And so she taught 1st grade in Opelika City, but there just weren't any PE jobs open. So I had an opportunity to get my master's done and did that. And then an intermediate job opened up that next year. So that's how I slid in. But it turned out, obviously, the best opportunity that I could have ever had, because 3rd graders are still, in terms of, you got your fundamental motor skills basically range, they're established, but they're still young, wet behind the ears when they come into a type of kind of program that I was establishing. But then you have that at the beginning of a 3rd grader's year, and then how they grow. And then you have 5th grade on the other end. And I'm doing things with my college students that I did with my 5th graders. Like, it's crazy because there's just that ability. I mean, you just have to raise that expectation with 5th grade and they'll meet it. And it's right before they start getting, number one, physically bigger than you, emotionally just kind of like all over the place with hormones and stuff like that. And then also, I mean, there's obviously a fundamental level of disrespect just generally for students and teachers, but that's when before they start getting, oh yeah, now I can talk back to you and it doesn't really matter, it's when they move off to middle school. So it was a really, really good kind of age group to teach. I was very pleased. Of course, first couple of years, you're just the really bad teacher learning two things. But then, years 3 through 7 were just a blast. And I do miss it. I miss the kids all the time, but
I hear you there. I taught at elementary, and it was probably my most enjoyable experiences.
Mm-hmm. That's right. But now, we had interns, and I had some PhD students come in towards the end of my time at Morse Avenue, and I really developed a passion for PET and really kind of bringing a college student back over, after a lesson, be like, all right, let's work through this. What happened? Why did this happen? And really expand on that. And same with PhD, it was just at another level. Like, okay, this is your research objective. Like, this is your dissertation. How do we need to craft things and working with them, so that was really good. But
okay. So then, at the level you're at now, maybe talk to us about kind of what your primary roles are, because you do kind of work within kind of a physical education, teacher education program, correct? But it's almost at the community college level. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I was actually hired in this department for 2 reasons. Number one, the courses, our department has just become more and more attractive to students due to online offerings, and just overall, we're within our health sciences division. So we are kind of the stair step to our nursing program, our rad tech program, in terms of medical terminology, nutrition, all these different things. So they just needed another person on board to be able to teach those classes. But also second, we have a concurrent enrollment program, which I feel like concurrent enrollment is pretty. Have you ever heard of concurrent enrollment?
I have, but it might be worth explaining, just because I'm sure a lot of the potential people that might be listening in, down the road might not be aware of it.
Sure. Yeah. So concurrent enrollment is where you can be a student at a community college, but also a student at a 4-year institution at the same time. Okay. And it's set by the higher ups at both institutions, and we align all the courses that they would need at the 4-year level on our level, and they take it on our campus, whether online or in person. And then they're also simultaneously taking a course at the 4-year institution, again, online or in person. And so geographically, the locations are pretty close.
Sure.
And so we do that with Auburn, of course, because we're right down the road.
Yep.
And so I was hired to do the concurrent enrollment programs and courses for physical education for Auburn. Just, of course, me being a graduate from there and understanding kind of the different courses that they offer. So with that being said, they hired me and they wanted to start this program. And so we have 2 courses right now. We have a practicum in physical education. I'm sorry, let me go back. We have foundations of education, physical education, and then a practicum in physical education. Okay. And we have big ideas and big hopes for the practicum, but we haven't gotten there yet because there's little things of red tape that we have to go through with being in schools and and really we just haven't gotten a school just on board like we want it. But we'll talk about this later. That's why I've reached out to the homeschool community, and so we've really jumped in on that as well. But my PED 200, the Foundations of Physical Education, has been, I guess, that PETE first experience, first opportunity for these students to come and be like, yeah, I really want to go into education. Maybe it's not PE, but I do want to educate. I do want to go into physical education, or maybe I just want to do more sports and rec, something like that. And this is just something that fits in. So
So so kind of listening to that class, it almost sounds like it's that introductory level class that they can take at your institution, then have it applied to maybe that 4-year program at Auburn, right?
That's right. And we are working. In fact, I have a meeting later this month with one of the professors. We're working more because I established the course and the content based off of what I kind of did at Auburn. And so, of course, there's more updates and different things that have happened. So we're getting closer and closer to aligning everything, making sure everything is aligned in terms of, so it can be a seamless transition. Right now, they're just accepting it as a PED elective that they can take at Auburn. But, you know, like I said, the whole the goal is to align that. So it's just like, yep, you've already taken your intro at Southern Union. Now you're good to go.
Yep. So I guess I asked too, is that communication between you and then, you know, let's say those faculty in PET programs at the program at Auburn, is that pretty consistent? Or do you have much communication? Because I've got to believe that, you know, that's kind of probably pretty important.
Yes, it is. And it's kind of a downfall too, because we work so well with them. And we found, in my department, how we're talking about this, we're only talking to them though. You know, there are other institutions that we need to be doing the same thing. We just haven't developed those relationships with. But they are, I mean, we are meeting all the time we actually just came back last Friday, a week ago. We toured the new kinesiology building at Auburn. We got to meet with all the College of Ed advisors and the kines advisor, toured their health and wellness recreation center and the football stadium. And we were able to take our advisors and we established a new wellness club here on campus. And we took all of our new club members there. So they were able to ask, and that's not just PE. I had a secondary math ed student that wanted to go into that, you know, and so all these different therapeutic massage students came from our program that are going there. So it was just experiences that they were able to do with that.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess that kind of leads into another question, just in terms of those partnerships, which you just a little elaborated on, but maybe if you could just explain partnerships that do exist in terms of school-based health education, physical education, and or adapted physical education right now, or even in the future that you're maybe hopeful to establish.
Sure. With our program, right?
Yeah.
Our PEDS program. Gotcha. So our ultimate kind of idea of it is to be very similar to the 4-year institution in terms of lab hours within the schools, preferably within our local schools, and that would be city schools and county schools. But the issue, kind of, I mentioned it earlier, the red tape that we're running into is, you know, the normal things, and rightfully so, the TB test, the background check, and it's very hard to ask our students for, if they're really not wanting to go into they're not bought in, they haven't said, yes, I'm committed. This is just kind of an introductory class, and maybe their advisor just put them in the class for a GPA booster. You know, it's all these different things. So it's very difficult to do that. And that's why we do have that practicum. But what we're finding is the partnerships, well, I'm sorry, I'm going a different way, but I'll make my way back to the partnerships.
Yep, that's okay.
The way we have two issues with that though. Number one, we're not catching our students early enough. Mm-hmm. So they have already, maybe it's, you leave a community college in 2 years, generally speaking, with an associate. So we're maybe catching them on the second semester of their second year. And they're like, oh, I wish I would have known this class earlier, because we could have done that concurrent enrollment and now we're just behind and now you're going to have to repeat things. Sure. Or we catch them early and we don't retain them. Right. And so they just kind of go off and they can change their major and do different things, but we didn't establish or we didn't follow up. So we're trying to work through those different things in terms of, keeping track of them and connecting up with them, different things. So those are our kind of two issues right now. But the partnerships, again, if we had that partnership with a school and they were given that experience early enough, hey, here's a lab hour, here's experience, let's go work in the schools a little bit. That would definitely benefit them on the four-year institution level, because one of your questions that you sent me that I wrote down, it's kind of the issue of, or let's see, it was like one thing that you would change. It would be the early intervention of just getting them immersed. What is a PE teacher do? Like what is the occupation? What is the culture? I can talk all day about my experience, but until you experience 80 kids running around, 90 kids running around at various levels, at various activities, you don't know. And so it's the shell shock. We all experience it as we went through our programs. It's the shell shock kind of, oh man, did I really want to do this? But if they can do that at early on at the community college level, then that would definitely help them later on, hopefully. One of my underlying goals that always is going is I want to make them a better junior at a four-year institution. Right. I want their professors to be like, oh, you already know this stuff. Let's move on. Let's go to the deeper stuff. Let's go to the overarching kind of things rather than the nitpicky stuff. So
right. But, yeah, and I guess that kind of leads into that follow-up question in terms of kind of where you're at. It's just kind of unique because I look at where I'm at in Minnesota and we have concurrent enrollment, but it really hasn't been established well in terms of health and physical education. So students that come from that 2-year institution, there's not a lot of courses that are going to transfer. There's going to be those general eds, but there's going to be very few of those core content courses. So that's where I think, where you're at, and I guess the connection you have with Auburn, it is a good startup for students, even if it's little. But then I guess from your perspective, what advice might you give those 4-year institutions, in terms of trying to not only recruit, but we just talked about that idea of retainment, because I know we're having some issues too here with students that start and they end up not making it through. Is there any perspective that you have to offer in terms of advice, being you are kind of in a unique situation?
Right. And I will say this, Ben, we are kind of, and this is of course never to toot our own horn, but we are on the forefront of that within our state. We've met with several other community colleges and they are very interested in what we're doing. And so that's kind of more weight on our shoulders. Like we want to do it right. We want to do it well. And we want to show, okay, it's working in these city school systems and this partnership. Now you can take it to other systems as well. But some advice I would offer to the 4 years is let's just make these connections early. And it benefits both institutions well. I mean, there's really no downside to this. Right. It just needs to be, and of course I came in and all this concurrent enrollment kind of a program was established already. I just in my own little niche, but it is a lot of work, but there is a great payoff. And so I guess reaching out to those local community colleges that in your area around you, and really kind of thinking from a 4-year institution, what kind of student do I want and what kind of student will do well with that degree hanging on their wall from my institution. You know what I mean? Like, what kind of student are we, what product are we releasing out into the workforce?
Right.
And we are able to say from Southern Union, we are equipping our students the best we can so that they can succeed. And there isn't a drop off. It's literally just seamless transition over, and then it's just up and up from there. So
right. Yeah. No, I think those are good points. So then I guess too, where are there areas you could identify right now in schools that kind of need to change in order to support and retain teachers?
Yeah. I had to think about this one quite a bit, because the first thing that comes to my mind is a level of physical education that I actually never really experienced, other than within the internship lab kind of time. But that is just the culture of the high school physical education realm. Mm-hmm. And I'm speaking to locally, my area and region,
right.
You know, where I am, what I see every day. There is a huge drop off, especially let's go elementary to middle. There's a big drop off, big time. And that's in terms of overall instruction, overall expectations of the students, overall expectations of, you know, what physical education is. So a lot of people that were in my cohort going through the same program I were, they had already minded they were going to be a coach. They had their sport specific coach. And I feel like this is just the general, I mean, it's always been said, right?
Yep.
But it's going from that coach mindset to educator mindset.
Yeah.
Like there shouldn't be a difference. You are an educator, you are a physical educator, you can still implement the same types of things.
Right.
And you can advance, like, there is no reason why a high school physical educator shouldn't be doing the same things, that like same type of content, same type of activities that I was doing with my fifth graders that I'm now doing with my college students, right? There's no excuse that shouldn't be doing. So I would say that's one of the biggest kind of things, changes or challenge that I see. And then secondly, within, I guess, the elementary setting is, we spoke on it earlier, if they can get early kind of experience on it, they're not going to be as, oh, really, this is what I was getting into. I wish I would have known that earlier, you know?
Yeah.
And again, that's kind of what we're hoping for on our end, is just get their feet wet a little bit with what the job actually entails. And it entails you and possibly an aide with a lot of kids for a short amount of time and maybe some equipment. You know, it's like, that's your life.
Yeah.
Go.
And I think, like you said, that practicum experience is critical. And I guess I would also say what's critical is making sure we can establish giving these opportunities to students with positive teachers, right? With not those, I guess, coaching oriented teachers where there's going to be clear instructional practices occurring. There's going to be clear management practices occurring. And, you know, I go back to that point that you made in terms of where you kind of see that drop off potentially at the middle school and high school level in terms of physical education. That was a big discussion point when I was at the University of Alabama, because that's where I got my graduate degree. And
awesome.
And you know, I think that coaching oriented mindset, I don't know, I see it here, but I think it might even be larger down there because of just the culture of, you know, for example, Auburn, Alabama football, you know, the whole atmosphere. But I don't know, is that something you might add or see?
Yeah, absolutely. You got the big three, right? Baseball, basketball, football. And those are going to be the equipment that you're going to have at a high school physical education program. That's the main equipment that you got. And if you want to do something else, you're kind of out of luck, you know, and that's, it's just such a wasted opportunity. I told my students just this past week, one of the greatest kind of worries and missed opportunities that we have in middle school is separating or like splitting PE by gender. Girls over here, boys over here. And I do understand, trust me, the reasons for that and different things like, but at the same time, that's what makes elementary physical education so great. I'm on a team with somebody that's different than me and that has different abilities, and that, and then the natural kind of progression of, okay, you do have women's sports and men's sports, but this is where those sports skills can be refined and mastered. And I feel like doing that in a co-ed environment does have its benefits.
Sure.
So,
yeah. You kind of led into another question, which is the role of equity, diversity, inclusiveness. How does that play in terms of maybe recruiting future educators into our field?
Yeah. Well, we all hopefully understand at this point a more inclusive, a more diverse, and a more equitable environment leads to innovation, leads to engagement, leads to, in the business world, more profits. It's more profitable. So let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's make sure that we are gaining various ideas from various backgrounds, from various experiences, and appreciating that. Whether we don't initially say, yes, that is awesome, that's good, like we can have pushback, we can have questions, we can disagree even. But the idea is like, it's the seed is still in there. And so it's like, okay, why did he say that? Why is it working here? And why do I disagree? And so we just kind of work through that. But it's just taking that opportunity of bringing different people into the room first, and being okay with that. And then being okay with disagreements, and doing it at a healthy level, an understanding level, and having a reason other than, well, that's just what I do. Like having like backing up your stance through research, through this, because that adds validity to it, of course. And that will help me, if you and I disagreed on something, but you're like, well, I'm basing this off of and I'm like, oh, okay, let me look into that. And that helps me change my viewpoint on things. But in terms of my overall thoughts on it, of course, I think it's a very important opportunity that we are missing, that we can do a better job of, and especially in, I guess, PETE roles too, because I speak to my, I'm from Montgomery, Alabama. I went to private school all through my academic career. So I was sheltered in a sense. And then I go and I'm a new teacher in a public school, which had, I think, our maybe close to 78% free reduced lunch rate, and I don't remember the demographics particulars, but, I was like, okay, I have to somehow relate. And that had to start with, number one, culturally, I am opposite. Like, I don't know. So it started with relationships.
Sure.
And once we began with relationships, then I was able to relate a little bit more. So.
No, yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think one of the things I really try to emphasize with my students when we do get into discussions about, equity, diversity, inclusiveness, is it's okay to be uncomfortable, right? That's how you grow, but it's not okay for you to be, uncomfortable and then just try to shy away from whatever it is, because
that's right.
Because you haven't been raised the way, what you're experiencing. So your example of, you acknowledging that you went to that private school and maybe had that privilege, and how that impacted you as you entered into a school that had a high percentage of free and reduced lunch. It wasn't something like, oh, I can't teach her anymore. It's no, I have to work through this. And I think that example of relationships you brought up is really important, because, I look at a lot of our students, who may come from the Twin Cities areas, some of those affluent suburbs, going and teaching into some of these really rural small schools. That can be a shock for them, but they have to be open-minded and they have to think about how they can overcome it, and so forth. So I think those are some good points.
And I would say a good vehicle of connection that we can make is sport, right? Is activity, is health and wellness, is physical fitness. Like, this is a universal language across because we are all people that, and our bodies need nourishment. Our bodies need like thrive out. We have very similar things going on. So that's really where you can connect across, cultural boundaries, I feel like, as well. And one other thing too, it's also being okay with changing. Like you can't just state, well, I'm going to stand firm on what I think. And right. you want to do that for definitely some possibly even moral things or foundational education practices. You want to stand firm, but it's also growing and evolving as an educator.
Yep.
Being okay with, okay, I'm not going to be stuck in the mud. I'm going to evolve.
Perfect. Yeah. And I guess kind of highlighting what we just talked about curriculum wise, how do, I guess, school-based physical education, maybe health education curriculums kind of need to evolve to really emphasize that equity, diversity, and inclusiveness?
Yep. Well, technology and digital distance, virtual learning is obviously running the show. It still is. I mean, some people are saying, I have many acquaintances at various four-year institutions, and they're talking about, the innovation of just AI instruction and all these different things. It's all swirling around. So we as physical educators, we can't let that just bypass us. We have to include it somehow, because that's going to make it more relevant to the students. That's going to hopefully aid and expedite instruction. But it also, we need to teach not the dangers of it, but the adverse effects of it as well.
Yep.
So I feel like if any curriculum needs to be evolved and advanced, it needs to include that component. That's an essential component. And that's something that, whether you like it or not, and whether you're a traditional PE teacher that's founded in your ways and you're executing a great program every year, you're pumping out wonderful things, that's good, but you can't not plug in this component somewhere.
Right. Yep.
You have to. The second thing that I thought about in terms of curriculum and evolution is this. And again, maybe I'm just in my own little bubble here, but I feel like physical education, let's take just physical education as a whole. What is our big goal that we're striving after?
Yep.
What is our what am I excited about? And for me, I don't have anything right now, and I don't have anything to tell the my PET students yet. This is what we're striving to. Now, of course, combating childhood obesity rates and becoming more active and all these are good, but what is the evolution of that? I feel like education does a good job of, okay, we're really working to now make on virtual learning more engaging, but what is our thing? What are we doing as the physical education community to advance our realm? And that's something that I feel like curriculum obviously will be driven by, but we need to establish that too. So I love your thoughts. I mean, just kind of if you have anything on that.
Yeah, I mean, as far as one of the things I always emphasize to my students is broadly kind of the job of a health educator, the job of a physical education teacher, is trying to get students to wrap their brain around, by the time a student graduates high school, do they have the confidence and confidence to kind of go out and lead a health enhancing lifestyle? All right. Sure. So I think when, for example, we look at the curriculum that may be more centered around that invasion-based games, because that may be what the physical education teacher really values, whether it's right or wrong, that can be somewhat detrimental to those students, because they may not be given those other opportunities, like engaging and learning about fitness or other lifetime oriented activities. So yeah, I definitely see your point. I always want to try to advocate to my students that try as best you can to create a well-rounded curriculum that offers a wide array of opportunities for your students. So that maybe it's one or two of those things that can stick, that they can walk away from and really enjoy, so that down the road they have that competence and confidence to be able to go out and do it. But then again, I think of like where I think of physical education teachers in the state of Alabama, knowing they generally get to see their students every day, but as you just highlighted earlier, they have anywhere from 60 to 70 to 80 to 90 students. And it's like, how do you effectively teach students and advocate for them when you're N of one, or you might have a para? It's almost like, yes, you have the ability to see your students every day, but it's also a disservice because there's only so much time and there's so many students. So, and I think that's just throughout the country, there's issues that we're kind of battling in terms of all of this different things. But at the end of the day, for me, it's, as a physical education teacher, can I create that competence and confidence so that by the time that student graduates, do they feel and understand why physical activity is important and want to go out and engage in it, whatever that it is, is what I try to consider and emphasize to my students.
Yeah, absolutely. It's what kind of individual do we want to leave our program? A physically educated individual, but what does that look like?
Right.
And that is someone that has the confidence and the skills to lead that physically active lifestyle post academic career, post, the 50s. It's like in your 60s, 70s, 80s. So absolutely. Yep.
Well, I guess just, I've got a couple other questions, but advice you would give to us in you're in higher education too, but higher education in general, to establishing those partnerships. And we've kind of highlighted it. You're kind of unique and kind of almost cutting edge to a degree. That could be one avenue, but are there other avenues that you could highlight too?
I would really say also establishing within those partnerships and bringing some of the students down to, like the students that are already in the program, bringing them down to the kind of community college level and speaking to those students, like just making it more relatable. Like, we're both college students. Y'all are just on this level. It's the same thing of your seniors talking to your newbies coming into a program. It's the same thing. But having that opportunity and experience would be really good.
And then, so just to clarify, you're kind of emphasizing, maybe faculty at those 4-year institutions developing maybe partnerships with those local community colleges, but maybe taking the time to go in and see what courses might be applicable where students would be a good fit to maybe jump into a 4-year institution in a health education or physical education program.
That's right. Because at the same, if you do that, right, as the 4-year faculty coming to the 2-year, and you are saying this is really good, and you're working with that 2-year institution's faculty, that's a student that's going to give you credit hours later. Like, that's money in your institution's pocket. So why not, right? And that's what we keep on reaching out to all these different institutions. It's like, we want to send you these students, and it's the chicken or the egg thing, though, because they come to us and they're like, well, how many students do you have? And we're like, well, we're starting to build it up. But to tell you the truth, we can only do so much building up because they're going to hear my silly voice all the time. But if they hear and I'm not going to mention any names, but a 4-year institution, coming and saying, oh, well, this was the one I was thinking about. Oh, you guys, you're talking about that. Oh, you have a connection. Okay, now I'm going to start. So I don't know which one is which one is the catalyst or not. If so, but I would definitely say that. One thing I did want to hit on that I failed to mention is the opportunities possibly that we are having on the community college level that you guys inspired, really, is the homeschool kind of population. My wife and I, we had decided to homeschool our children. We have 3 with 1 on the way, so we have quite a bit. But both of us being educators, we just felt homeschool was the best kind of thing for our family, opportunity for our family. But with that being said, when I heard you guys at Shape and how you guys have established these programs, bringing these homeschool groups in, just last semester, we had our very first homeschool group come in, and my students in my PED 200 class were able to do their final project or their final lesson with these students. And it was just circuit stations based off the components of health, weight, and fitness. But it was just a really good opportunity and experience. Number one, it was the first time that my PETE students ever taught somebody other than them, their classmates, their peers.
Yep, that peer teaching. Yep.
Absolutely. Number two, the homeschool group was a group of 25, and it ranged in terms of grade level from K. No, I think we even had some pre-K.
Yep.
Pre-K to 8.
Okay.
So there was a wide range. And so each one of my students had to, and I grouped the rotation groups based off of pre-K through 2, but they had to be ready within they're stationed in states. Maybe it was muscular endurance. It was a muscular endurance station, but you had to diversify your teaching based off of the rotation.
Yep.
So you had to be ready for all of it. And I'm like, this is what a PE teacher, you're going to be certified K through 12.
Yep.
You got to know how to do this. So it was a really good experience for them. And then it was a really good experience for the parents of the homeschoolers as well, because, we are different. And I say my wife and I are different because obviously I was a physical educator. We run PE every day when daddy gets home. It's just normal.
Mm-hmm.
But every homeschool, I would say the majority of the homeschool families are not like that.
Right.
They are stressing, number one, over just homeschool curriculum. If you weren't an educator, why did I do this? How can I do this? Am I doing this right? Is my child staying up to things?
Yep.
Or they're in a co-op, which is fine, great, perfect. But that PE is sometimes lacking in that co-op as well.
Right.
So it gave the parents some energy, some excitement. We even I had my students prepare all their lessons, and they actually gave them to the parents, so they could take them home and do them. And they had to list out activities, and they listed out equipment lists and stuff like that.
Yep.
But it gave the parents too some excitement and some energy and some encouragement. Okay, I can do this. It doesn't have to be, whatever I see on Pinterest. It can just be straight up muscular endurance. Can be just learning how to do a proper sit up, and the muscles learned and worked. And so it was really good on all those different fronts. But
absolutely, yeah. And I actually really like that idea of presenting the lesson plans to the parents as a means to give them some understanding for what they could potentially do. Because I totally get where you're coming from in terms of, parents maybe not having a clear understanding in terms of curriculum. And I especially say physical education because, the conversations I've had with parents, the students are out doing physical activities,
sure,
but it's not necessarily, especially at the elementary level, necessarily emphasizing those fundamental motor skills in the development in there. And
that's right.
Go ahead.
I had a parent come to me and she said, well, we're meeting the CDC guidelines of the, minimum amount of moderate to vigorous. And she had her ducks in a row in terms of that. I said, okay, great. But are we meeting these different things and I just mentioned the components of health related fitness just because, and she was one of the parents of the older ones. I think it was like a 6th or 8th grader. And I was like, well, does he know this, this, and this? And little simple things like how to check your heart rate and da-da-da-da-da. And she goes, oh no, I hadn't thought about that. And so we can plan, but it is, if you're not like in that mindset, it can get kind of lost. And so, but yeah, I mean, that kid is a lacrosse player. He's a soccer player. Like he's getting his activity. He knows how to, like we even did a little game design. I mean, he's all about crafting different games and doing different builds and stuff, but there were some parts that he did miss in terms of that fitness realm. So, yeah.
Sure. I guess any challenges that you see in terms of, higher education, HETE, PETE, that you think faculty need to be aware of or anticipate in terms of kind of recruitment and retention of future professionals?
Yeah, it's you cannot change the occupation that they're walking into. You can't, I'm sorry, you can change it. You can't change the class numbers.
Sure.
You can't change the problems. Like you need to just address them, and you need to let them know early that these are the things that they're going to face.
Mm-hmm.
You need to let them know in the state of Alabama, they're going to make X amount of dollars starting out with their bachelor's.
Sure.
You can't set these lofty kind of pie in the sky expectations. You need to have them here. And then you can say, okay, here's where we are. How will you make them better? Mm-hmm. How will you, from day one, already have planned for this and this and this and this? Sure. And if anything is better than what, that's icing on the cake. Now you can just put aside all these things you already planned, but you have it planned. And then teaching them, like you said, a well-rounded kind of PETE program. Here are the different instructional models. Mm-hmm. Utilize a lot of them. Don't get stuck in one. One of the kind of regrets I always had, and that I didn't explore more of those different models, but I was, I'm a sport ed, like through and through educator. Yep. And I will defend it to the grave of how like there's just so many opportunities. And it's just, I love sport ed. I actually run that PED 200 class in a sport ed model. So they get to experience it. Yep. They don't know what they're doing until we get to that point in content. Like, guess what? You've been living this model. And so tell me and we go through what are the good things, bad things, all these things. So, but yeah, it's seeing those, I guess, giving them the expectations early, knowing what they're walking into. And I really think you're going to lose some, but if we're already losing some anyways, I hope we start retaining more. If we lose 3, but we retain 1, over time, hopefully we'll shift that number to more of the retention. And okay, now we have the mindset, we have the right mindset. But that's hard at our level. And I say our level, really freshman, sophomore level, because you are going to change so many times. I mean, I changed my degree 4 or 5 different times. So, but that is a challenge. It's in terms of that recruitment. I'm not going to walk up to somebody and be, hey, you want to teach 85 kids?
Right. Yeah. No, and I think that's where your point is well noted in terms of you got to let them know what the realization of teaching is in your area, in the environment, right? If students have forgotten that walking into a physical education class at the middle school level is going to involve teaching upwards of 60, 70 kids, and they don't realize that until they actually get to some of those practicum experiences, maybe in their upper level methods courses and so forth, that's problematic, right? So yeah, I think that's a great point in terms of giving them the expectations early and what they're going to be walking into, so to speak.
And I think you can do that well if you, especially because rightfully so, they need the foundation. They need the educational foundation early on. So that's why we're in the classroom most of the time early in the program. But if we can have just the simple experiences of, and this is just through planning or opportunities, I learned this method, I see this method. So like Monday, I learned about this in the classroom. Mm-hmm. Tuesday, I'm in the school, and whether I'm teaching it or not, I'm seeing this method from this cooperative teacher that's already knew what I was doing, Right. And so it's just, and then over time, okay, now I know this method. Okay, now I can teach this from the classroom, Right. And so Auburn did a really good job of that. I feel like in the area of adaptive PE, we can definitely do a much better job as a whole. Okay. With that. I feel like there was just so much to adapted, and rightfully so. Right. And I feel like we just weren't ever given an opportunity to, and I mean, you can only teach to the types of children that you have, right? Or the population that you have. But at the same time, I feel like a lot of stuff was in one ear, stuck for the test, and then out, and then didn't really get hands on. So
sure, no, that makes sense. I guess any other closing final thoughts that you didn't get an opportunity to maybe discuss?
I don't think so. Just one thing that we are on the forefront of is we are not getting to do the homeschool, excuse me, we're not choosing to do the homeschool group this year. We're actually in the schools.
Okay.
So we have kind of made that transition, but we're not in a full-on kind of lab placement throughout the semester environment. But we have been invited to run a bike safety week
nice.
at one of the local primary schools. And so my students don't know it yet on this campus, but they will be tasked with hitting, they'll be given a certain topic within bike safety, helmet fitting, rules of the road, something like that. And they're going to have to make the activity for, it's going to be second grade, and they're going to have to make it hitting all the learning domains, but also making it physically active. So they're going to be tasked with that, and they're going to get that probably in 2 weeks, and they'll be teaching it first week of April. So,
okay. No, that's awesome.
But so that's kind of like, it's going to be our first step in the door within
absolutely.
the city school system. And so I'll definitely get back with you on some of because I'm working with the PE teacher. This has been in planning stages for a long time, but got to work now we're to the principal level. And so she's either going to say, they got to get these tests, they got to have this just to do this.
Yep.
So I'll let you know how that kind of goes, to kind of that red tape we won't have to get through, but hopefully it'll be pretty quick process. So
that's cool. I know they organize and have a bike safety program here in Mankato, where our university is, and they've got a big trailer with the bikes, and it travels around to all the different elementary schools. And I've helped with the program previous summers, but that's a great idea to connect Pete students to kind of exactly what you're doing. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can't say I have anything else. I definitely appreciate,